All right, we've got a little top-down 2D shooting game. And we spawn out and we shoot and bullets go out. And we can see them here on the left. But it's not a very good system. And it's not a very good system for a couple of reasons. One, the bullets don't go away. But two, this is a perfect example of where we could use a object pooler. Because the bullets get spawned. Gosh, my background color is like the same color as the Unity. Okay, the bullets get spawned and they get instantiated, right? We have to create room for them in memory. It's called allocating. We need to allocate some space in our RAM that our game uses for these bullet objects to take up. We destroy them, we free that up, we say, hey, no one's using this anymore. And eventually, sometime later, the garbage collector comes through and runs a fairly extensive process of figuring out which objects don't have any references to them and freeing up and deallocating that space, collecting all the garbage. And that's an expensive process. So when we have objects that get created and destroyed a lot, it can be more performant in our games to leave them in our memory and then reuse them. And that's what an object pool is and does. So we're going to add an object pool to this one. Now, there's only so much I want to do. I'm going to keep this object pool very simple because I'm going to be refactoring it in the future. We have our player, they have a weapon handler, and I have this section called weapon config, which controls the prefab they use, controls the speed the bullets shoot, the fire frequency. I want this information actually to be its own data object, a weapon. And when I fire a weapon, I just say weapon.fire, and then that weapon will spawn the correct bullet, the correct number of bullets, and shoot them at the right velocity in the right direction, right? So I could have a single blast, I could have a laser gun, I could have a shotgun thing, I could have all sorts of different weapon types. And the player code, all the player code does is tell the weapon to fire, right? It doesn't need to know any of those specifics. I've compartmentalized those specifics. I abstract that out into its own little data object where they can handle it. But that's not what we're doing in this video. This video is the object pooler. But that knowledge that I have this future use case where I might have different prefabs, I need to keep that in mind. So I want this object pooler to be really nicely contained just inside of one script. And doing that is, what am I trying to say? Doing that is helpful because it, having that future in mind lets me sort of plan ahead. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to leave it in the weapon script. I know I'm probably going to get rid of this and put the object pooler like inside of that abstract weapon handling class, which is probably going to be a scriptable object, and that's really neat, but that's not what we're doing here. So let's add a new object pooler. I guess we'll call it that. And what does an object pooler need? Well, we're going to be replacing the player's instantiate function. And this instantiate function takes a prefab, takes a location, and it creates an object. And it returns it to the player. So we're going to create a function that can do that. It can return a game object. Create object given a prefab and given a position. Now, this code won't work if we give it a prefab because we could give it different prefabs and then it won't know what to do with that. It'll be very confused. There are strategies around it. There's a really clever one I've used before, using a dictionary to index multiple pools and control them all in one place, and it would not even be a mono behavior, it would be its own class. It's very clever, but we're actually not going to do that. We're going to let that be something that the object pooler just keeps track of itself. Right, so we're going to take that out of the bullet prefab, and we're going to move it into the object pooler. We're eventually going to move everything into the object pooler and then just rename the object pooler to be like weapon and then do a bunch of refactoring. But I want this video to demonstrate a basic object pooler first and then demonstrate that that data encapsulation second. So, haha, here we are. And then we will. And there we go. We're done. I have my object, and it will instantiate. It'll just run this code for me. But this is enough to let us actually handle it. Change up my player script first. So we'll do pooler. We'll initialize that in awake. And then we have a pooler reference. And we'll take out that bullet prefab because we're getting rid of this entire line of code to be. Oh, I need to pass in the rotation, don't I? Pooler dot create object, and we give it the position and the rotation, and it instantiates it for us. Easy. Isn't life easy? Okay, so now that we've taken the instantiate function and hid it inside of another component for some reason, we can make a pool. So we're going to use a list to make our object pool. And we're going to keep track of all of the objects in our list. And when we need an object, we're going to go through and we're going to look for an object that is deactivated. That is this checkbox unchecked. And when that checkbox is unchecked, it exists in memory, but it's not going to receive any of those event update loops, and the physics system will ignore it, and the rendering system will ignore it, and it just won't do anything. It'll still have a position, so that's important to know. And we're going to pull an object from that list of game objects that are deactivated. We're going to activate one, and then we're going to move it to this position and rotation. And if there are no objects in the list, then we will make a new one. So let's make a list. Public list, private list of game objects, and we'll call it a pool. And let's initialize that in inline. Why not? It's probably giving me the never used. Yep, error. We could also initialize the list in start or awake or something. Okay. So we need to search. I like to type out my code as comments to get through the logic of it, and then we'll just go through and we'll replace the comments with code. Search through the list, and loop through the list and find a deactivated game object. Activate it, reset its position and rotation, and so on. Return. If we do not code one, create a new one and add it to the list. So this will create an object, and it will be up to the bullet to deactivate itself at the appropriate time, which is the one, you could say, drawback of this method, because that's some extra logic. The bullets don't get to be totally independent of the system that is pooling them. They have to know about it. But we'll get to that. So usually your list wouldn't be game objects. Usually your list would be some type that knows about the pooler, and that way it's hard to give it an object that you're pooling without that object you were pooling know about the pooler, because by being of that more specific type, it implicitly has the knowledge of that. In this case, deactivating on collisions instead of destroying. Okay, but we'll get to that in a second. First, let's do the list part. To loop through a list, love a good for each pattern, and pool is our collection, and I can't use that. pooled object in pool. If pooled object dot active in hierarchy. Active in hierarchy is interesting. There are two different types of active and deactive. There's active self and there's active in hierarchy. Why are there both? Well, the answer has to do with the way that Unity treats parents and children. So here I have a parent child as game as player, and a child object is player visuals, and a child object to that is square and circle. If I deactivate player, it and all of its children are deactivated. But if we look at square, it is still active. The reason it's deactive is because of its parent, not itself. So we care if the object is deactivated as far as like the hierarchy is concerned. I don't want to be looking at an object that is technically activated or is set to be active, but it still has been deactivated via its parent. I don't want to like get messed up. So we're going to use active in hierarchy, which is going to show us somewhat unhelpfully named, but helpfully once you just remember to take a look at the hierarchy and say, yes, it or its children, and not active self. So active in hierarchy, the one you should default to, that will generally behave how you think it will. So if it is not, bang, exclamation point there, not active, then we can return it. So we need to reset it and return the object. So we'll do that and that, and we'll leave our comment here. If we do not find one, we need to add it to our list. We need to make a new one, and let's store a reference to that. And let's store the reference to the new one we're about to create into a game object variable. That way I can do two things with it. I can go to my pooled object, my pool, and add it to my pool. Rename that object. And then I can return it back to whatever is calling this create object function. Yeah. Great. So pretty simple. I have a list. It doesn't need to have any objects in it because we will allow it to grow as needed. This is the drawback of if we need 1,000 objects at one point in time, and then we never need that many again, it will never shrink. It'll just keep using up that memory until we reload a scene, right? But for the way I plan on this game working, that would actually probably be fine. Handling the maximum number of bullets that you could have on the screen is probably not going to be so much to hang out and have around because this is a pretty small area. I don't plan on a lot of camera movement. I think it's going to be more of like a Binding of Isaac type of deal, where you're going to have fast bullets that spawn and despawn all the time, but not like, they're not flying up for like an hour. Not going to be that many of them. Okay, so we're not ready to go yet. We need the bullets to collide with things. So I have the bullet. Does the bullet have, I made that script, but does the bullet actually have it? Because it's kind of an empty, yeah, it has the bullet on it. Rigid body 2D and a circle collider. Probably as a child object of it, maybe. So on collision enter, 2D, we hit something. We want to, normally this is where we would destroy the bullet, right? We get rid of it. But we're not actually going to be doing that. Instead, we're going to be setting itself to deactivate it. So we're going to get a reference to our own game object, and we're going to use the setActive function false. And then the object pooler will now take our pooled object, and it will use the setActive function, and it will activate it, which is important. Let's reset its position and rotation. Tricky question. How do we do that? Because sorry, I had to pass that position into the function here. How do we reset its position? Well, if I'm making the bullet, then the bullet, interesting. How do we do that? So the reason this is tricky is because I don't know what this object is, right? It has a transform because it's a game object. I could reset its position and rotation via the transform, but it doesn't, it might have momentum and velocity and angular velocity. So if it has a rigid body, I need to turn those things off. I don't want to check if it has a rigid body and then turn it on or off as I see fit. Instead, I want it to handle itself because that makes more sense to me. So we're going to let the bullet reset itself. I can't use the word reset because there's another function in Unity that's called that, an event function. So we're going to call one ours reset bullet, and we are going to velocity equals vector 2.0, and here's a one to remember: rigid body dot velocity dot angular velocity equals 0. It spins. That messed me up in a golf game. I would teleport the golf ball back to the hole and it would fly off again. I'm like, teleport it back and then turn off velocity. And it'd be like, teleport back to the, you hit it out of bounds, teleport it back. And then it would just like roll off the tee. And I was like, why is this happening? Where is this getting this velocity from? Well, from friction, it was spinning. Okay. So we also need to turn its angular velocity, its spinniness back to 0. And let's make that public so we can call it from somewhere else, like an object pooler. And the object pooler is, of course, now needs to be of type bullet. Well, it doesn't need to do. We can do a get component bullet on that, but I don't think we need to do that. Dot game object. We can rename this to bullet. And instead of doing that, we can do reset bullets, and then the bullet can take care of itself and turn itself back on. And then bullet dot transform dot position position bullet transform dot rotation rotation. Okay. And then we will return. Should we return bullet or game object? Let's return bullet. Bullet equals new equal object dot get component bullet. I already have a variable called bullet. New bullet. All right. So this takes a bullet. Of type bullet. And that's fine. We can do a get component call on the bullet, and we can give it its velocity. We could also move this dot velocity code into the bullet script and have the bullet be responsible for like how it shoots itself. That would be all right too. But that's fine for now. We could also return the game object from the function. But let's rename that create object pooler. Let's call it bullet pooler, because this is now, that's what it does. It's not an object pooler. It's very specifically a bullet pooler. And then let's call that bullet. Let's rename it properly. Bullet prefab. And then create bullet. So, yeah. Deactivate itself. Okay. Did we do it one and done? Let's go to our player and let's add a bullet pooler and let's give it our bullet lock the inspector bullet. That should be it, right? All right, there we go. Take a look. I have 4 bullets in my, my player is moving because I have a stupid thing. So I have a bullet, I shot it, it created it, the bullet deactivated itself, but it's still there in the hierarchy grayed out. Shoot another bullet, it uses this one, teleports it back. It teleports the same game object back and uses it again. And that's an object pooler. I take 2, I made a second one, and now there's 2 hanging out up there. And then as long as I don't have more than 2 on the screen at once, it'll just keep reusing the same game objects. Now let's start spamming it and shooting as fast as I can, which I think if I just hold the button down. And now we can see we actually have like because of my fire rate, right? If I was in one corner shooting the bullet to be alive as long as possible, there'd be a certain max number of bullets. There we go. Cool. Let's, for fun, actually write a start function, and we will move our list to populate it there. And then we will pre-populate pool. And I'll make that and create number. I'll make this be 5. Okay. 4 less than number is a terrible variable name. Create bullets. We'll just make it a rotation identity. Var b create bullet. Game object that's set active false. There's a nice variable name. Tells me what to do. I don't like the inline list creation because I make mistakes too often. It's fine. It's not bad code or anything. I like to be very explicit, and I go, yes, okay, I am resetting or initializing or clearing my list, and I know when I'm doing that. Doing it first. Okay. So now if I hit play, I should just have 5 bullets. I have 1 because it kept reusing the object. Okay, we'll just instantiate it the old-fashioned way and then turn it off. But make sure to add it to a pool. Because instantiate and get component, these aren't super fast functions, right? They can be they go slow. If I have a shotgun blast, right, I don't want my game to judder the first time I fire, 40 bullets in a frame, which with particle effects and stuff is not an unreasonable thing to do. So do I have 5 bullets to begin? Yep. And now I can use them as I see fit. That's an object pooler. Okay, the next step for this project is to do that, refactor the entire thing into having a nice contained bullet, and weapon manager, and I think I want to have the weapon and its configuration all be in one place. Right now it's in 2 places, speeds up here, bullets down there. What a mess. I want all that in one scriptable object, and then I can put the bullet pool in that scriptable object, which is super neat. And I think as far as like teaching a pattern goes, it's pretty clean. There are definitely better ways to do object poolers, but this, we're not gonna have that many different weapons. This one's gonna be fine. Probably. And if we gotta refactor it, we gotta refactor it. That's like, we're learning, we're going. But an object pooler keeps a running list of bullets, of objects, of game objects, and it pulls ones that you are allowed to use. Mine only used 1 list, right? I only used 1 list of all of my active and deactivated game objects, and I had to go figure out which one wasn't active. If I have 100 objects and they're all active, and I need to create a 101st new one, right? Then I would have to loop through all 100 of them before I got to this next thing, right? So this isn't great. This isn't excellent. It's fine. It's fine, but it's not amazing, right? There's definitely lots of ways we can improve on this. One more note to add, this return statement will end the function right then and there. It'll end the loop. It will break out of the loop. It won't keep looping. It won't go down and do any of the code down here. So returning this stops this code from happening. This is sort of like an else statement. If we never found a bullet here, then the return statement never happened, so this code will run. But this return is sort of acting as a it's like a ripcord. It's like an early abort. You know, it just yanks it right out of the function. It just ends it. So it doesn't go through the loop more than it needs to, and it doesn't create a new object if it already found one. Okay. Let's give ourselves 6 bullets. I don't want to be greedy. Okay, what is this warning? What do you want? Rename to, yeah, okay, sure. Okay, it's a bullet pool. We did it. We made an object pool. I started demonstrating one with game objects, and I decided to change it to actually the specific bullet objects, and that's because I wanted to move my reset code right to the object. But it wouldn't be unreasonable to not do that, to have it all just be in the game objects, except for like this part, and then actually the player, in shooting the bullet, is accessing their rigid body anyway. So one, we could have just had it be the pool be of rigid body 2Ds instead of game objects or of bullets. And we could also have the player, resetting its velocity anyway. We could also just reset its angular velocity while we're at it, and we wouldn't have those problems. You know, if I have a trail renderer on the bullet or something, I kind of like, and things like that need to get reset. I like having the logic sort of contained here in the bullet, so I can like take care of all those little doodly doos. But you know, something to keep in mind. Like there's some pretty simple ways to do an object pooler. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.